Before I start talking about Coach Neal Brown, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I am the way I am. You might understand some of my opinions a little bit better, at least where they come from. I was born an idealist, I've got no doubt about that. But I also grew up reading the Chip Hilton sports books written by West Virginia native Claire B. If you don't know about Claire B., possibly the greatest basketball coach of all time, you need to go check your West Virginia history. And I'll put a link in the description below. But reading those books definitely crystallized my ideas about what a coach, a player, and a person should be. Gave me no illusions about what people are, but definitely that idealistic vision of what they can be. Now I'm going to tell you a big secret. Coach Brown is not the winningest coach in West Virginia football history. He hasn't won enough games to satisfy anybody, including himself, including me, and I'm sure including a lot of the people posting very negative comments on the discussion boards, if you can call it discussion. But that still leaves the question of why the record is not what everyone hoped it would be by this point. A lot of people want the easy answer, so they just blame the coach. And that's a known psychological aspect. There are people who are wired to prefer answers. There are people who are wired to prefer questions. We like answers, we just don't consider them to be the finishing line. More like a starting point. And not just wired that way, actually. It is a combination of nature and nurture. But it's a very real psychological division. And the people who are wired for answers are never going to like Neal Brown. But let's talk about things anyway. And people get mad when we go back to looking at Dana Holgorsen. But that's where the story begins. Holgorsen did leave major gaps in talent and simply bodies on the roster. And the offensive line is maybe the key example where there were two good players, one of whom got injured in the second game. Before the season, there was one player who had experience at center, and he retired due to injuries. So Brown was left with two good players, then down to one, two or three journeyman guys who never really caught on, and nobody to play center. And I don't care if you have 85 scholarship players who are all 5-star. If none of them can play center, you're still screwed. So 2019, there was no running game. Middle, outside, nothing. Then picked up, did some recruiting, and it takes time, even for the best players, to be really ready to play Power 5 offensive line. And that includes Frazier and Milam. Picked up Nestor, who ended up breaking his hand for his first year. But things progressed. By 2021, the running game was good. Definitely better in the middle than outside, and problems with the really strong teams. In 2022, even better. We had some marvelous running games. Partly, of course, because Brown had recruited better running backs. But the line opened holes. Still mostly in the middle, tackle to tackle, but things getting better. People who say there has been no improvement because they just look at the one-loss record aren't paying attention. The offensive line has radically improved, and there is depth behind these players. The running back room is outrageously improved, and there is depth. We're something like 4 or 5 players deep in the running back room, although that includes a couple of freshmen who aren't proven yet. Things have gotten better. People also say that Brown does not develop players. And if you point to somebody like Wyatt Milam or Zach Frazier, and if I call him Lance Frazier, please forgive me. For some reason I got that name stuck in my head, and I have no idea why. We'll blame it on being old and gray and going bald. But you name these guys as being developed, and some people will say, well, they've done that themselves. You know, they're good West Virginia kids who've, actually just worked hard. And this somehow becomes their evidence that Brown doesn't develop players. Well, of course, players don't develop themselves alone. It has to be teamwork. It's got to be the coaches, including wait staff, and the players. You got to have players who are willing not just to work hard, but to work insanely hard, and to work smart. I'm going to hopefully work my way back to that smart part. But also look at Garrett Green. A lot of people wanted Green to start his very first year and his second year, and they claimed that the fact that he wasn't starting proved that Brown just favored certain players and didn't like Green. And they said this even though Green supported Daggy openly and has discussed his own problems with making the reads. Green understands. It's the fans who won't. Okay, now look at Green the end of last season, and that's not proof that, oh my gosh, look how good he is, he should have started. It's proof that he was being developed. Look at him in the spring game. Look at him, how he ran the offense, how he worked with the kids in the special events. Look at how he has developed his body. This isn't that young, thin kid who did a little jiggle on his first run out of bounds and got yelled at by Coach Brown. This is a player who has worked hard and has matured physically and mentally. He has been developed very, very well. And this is happening at other positions. He just happens to be one of the ones that's going to be the most obvious this season. There has been progress. Well, with all this progress, why have we had problems? And I'm dipping back to Dana Holgorsen again, and this is the part that people don't really think about. Dana Holgerson is a do what I tell you coach. I'm sure of that. And there are players who like it that way. Think back in your time in school. Whether you were one of the people who just wanted to be told what to do in order to get a grade, or who really liked the fill-in-the-blank true-false questions, or the bubble tests, and hated essays, or if you were one of the ones who liked the ideas, liked a teacher who made you think. Either way, you had a teacher you loved, you had a teacher you hated. And it was because they did things the opposite way that you felt comfortable. What maybe you did best or did easiest or were just used to. And Holgerson undoubtedly attracted the type of player over time who just wanted to be told, do this. And you were judged strictly on whether you did that or didn't do that. Well, Coach Brown is a different kind of coach. He's a coach who wants the player to think, to learn, and to understand their position, the positions around them, the team, the game. And players who want answers are not going to work in that system. And it doesn't much matter whether they want to or not. If they are just so used to being told that they either have to have it that way or can't adjust, it's not going to work. They're not going to play well. And I think Bryce Ford Wheaton and Sam James may be two prime examples. They both understood what they needed to do, but they never quite managed to do it. I hope they find success. If they find the right coach, either who coaches to their style or who is able to bring them along to that next level, they'll do well. But that psychological difference, even more than the talent issue, slowed down the progress. And in part, it's because Coach Brown wants to recruit players who feel at home at WVU and for whom feeling at home really matters. He wants to create that culture. And if you're bringing in players who want that kind of culture, who want to feel at home, and you've still got players on the team who don't feel at home, that vibe's going to come through. And it's going to affect who stays, who doesn't. And we lost some recruits because of guys who just hadn't left but weren't happy. And you can't blame the players necessarily. It was just a radical switch. And some left, some tried to stay. Some, I'm sure, were asked to leave. And there was a time when you had two different teams and they weren't working well together. And it took time. And of course we had COVID, NIL, the transfer portals. People point out every team had to deal with those. But they weren't dealing with those at the same time that they were dealing with this very radical shift in the psychology of the team, in the chemistry of the team. And of course, if you really love answers, you probably don't particularly believe in the matter of chemistry or psychology for the team. Well, some teams win just through talent or stubbornness. But chemistry overall can make a difference. Or the rah-rah stuff, as Coach Holgerson, or forgive me, Dana Holgerson, I do not like to give him that title, but as Holgerson said. Now, we have the team. It's not a perfect team. There are still issues with depth. Still relying a little too much on the transfer portal for not just the total number of players, but we have too many guys in the defensive backfield who came through the portal. You want more stability. Well, they've also got commitments from 6 or 7 defensive backs for the coming year. So, problems get identified. Problems get, if not solved, they get treatment. Coach Brown, and I know this drives a lot of people nuts, but he loves to analyze things. And it pays off in the long run. He has analyzed where problems are each year. He has analyzed fixes. He has applied fixes. Some of them didn't work. Concentrating on defensive backs in 2020 or so, 2021, didn't work. They didn't get guys who felt at home enough to stay. Whether it was NIL money or what, a bunch of defensive backs left. Well, that takes time to correct. You know, NIL is compared to free agency, but it's not really free agency. It's pretty dang hard to just bring in a whole new team, even if you want to. But Neal Brown has brought in a whole new team over a period of 4 years. This is his team. Now he's going to be calling the plays, but it's not going to be the same offense, because this is the first time he's had the players who have the abilities and the willingness to run the kind of offense Neal Brown wants. And it's going to be a much more interesting and much more successful offense. Now we all know that Neal Brown has to win more games this season in order to keep his job. Ren Baker has said that it's about more than wins, and it is about more than wins. He listed being able to recruit, being able to retain players, getting players to graduate. It's about how the players grow as people. Well, Brown has checked every one of those boxes. Checked and double checked. Now, okay, so yes, retaining players was a problem early. That's been corrected. So, if Ren Baker sticks to what he has said, every box is checked except wins. How many wins will it take? Spin the wheel and guess. Of course, Baker has said it also. It's how we win or how we lose makes a difference. And if they're, if the 6 top players have season-ending injuries and the season kind of gets out of hand, well, that's a factor. But I personally think 7 wins is the floor. I think 10 wins is a definite possibility. probably somewhere in between there. Of course, Neal Brown says we're not going to finish last. And people get mad because he didn't say we're going to finish first. Well, guess what? Neal Brown isn't that kind of coach. He tries to make promises that he believes he can keep. They don't always work out. Things happen. That's one reason he isn't saying we're going to finish 6th, 5th, 4th, 1st, whatever. Because he knows crap happens. And he knows it also depends on what the other teams do. But Neal Brown is a good coach. He knows what he's doing. He knows the players that he needs. And he has gone out and he's gotten them. The team is in place to show who Neal Brown is as a person and as a coach. Now, if he wins a bunch of games this season, I know some fans out there are going to find some way to not give Brown his share of the credit. But Neal Brown is a good coach who has taken the time to build a team from rubble, full of gaps, into a well-structured, carefully built team that is ready to win and is set to win in the future. We should see a very good season this year and a better one next year. And if Neal Brown stays as the coach, we should be seeing these 8 to 10 win seasons regularly, without the drops down to 4 and 5 wins. This will be a solid program, and that matters. Well, I forgot to ask you before, so I'll ask you now. Please click the thumbs up and the subscribe button, the notification bell, make comments, tell your friends, and come back. I'm not sure what the next video is, but come back and see some more, and then we'll see you come season. Well, fall camp should be interesting. I'm sure there'll be videos to make then. So long.